This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, I asked Joey about feelings.
Woo! Northwestern girls. This is what a Joey sounds like. And this is what an executive producer and emo band leader, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. Ugh, sorry. The voice is not cooperating.
If you were starting an emo band, what would the name of your emo band be? Oh, that's a good one.
No. That would be really good. Can you imagine like the melodic tunes?
Do we have any keeping of the house? I think we're clean.
I would also probably potentially say that we are clean. I think the one thing, in case I haven't actually said this aloud, but I'm just acknowledging that we are saying it right now, is that you may have already seen, but sometimes we'll be bringing you episodes made by our other colleagues at Sylvain. And recently, Aaron, who is near and dear to our pod, as you know, had read his article that was both in our newsletter progress report, but also Ad Age. And that was really cool. But you'll also potentially start to see some more of those peppered in to our regularly scheduled nonsensical programming. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up. And that it'll be really cool.
I think sometimes they'll be supplemental, but during the summer months, because people have vacations, they may be temporarily like the episode for that week. But yeah, it's nice to hear other voices. There's a state of aging piece that was just written in the Progress Report newsletter by Joanne Bolens, and that may be coming soon as well. So, well, now we're clean. Subscribe to the Progress Report at progressbysylvain.co. I think that is the website.
That's it. Nice work.
It's a good newsletter. We get a lot of like love emails about it. I think it is like genuinely like positive, useful, actionable, and uplifting. Comes every 2 weeks. So yeah, you should read it. Jess, you saw a movie, saw maybe more than one movie, and you wanted to talk about it. What do you got?
That's true. So, I don't know about you, but I was very eagerly awaiting the arrival of Inside Out 2. Inside Out 1 was, in my opinion, a really incredible movie. It had been many moons since its arrival. So Inside Out 2,
like a decade, right?
Anxiously awaiting it. Also, yeah, many, many moons. Also, if you are on the Iowa Debris train, as I am, it's just like anything that she's doing, I want to see it. And that she was a part of this was very exciting. For those fans of The Bear, she is the co-star. But I digress.
What role did she play in Inside Out 2?
She plays Envy.
Oh, okay.
Super big eyes. Giant eyes, small creature with big eyes. I don't know. It's funny to think aside, but we can talk about the shapes that they all took in a minute. But anyway, I'm here because besides being interested in this movie, I think there is something really, like, without too many spoilers, that if you haven't already seen it, a thing that you might know that is core to Inside Out 1 is that there is sort of this, like, the main characters of this movie are feelings. Joy, sadness, disgust, anger, and fear. But what's interesting is that in Inside Out 2, like all of the hubbub, is that there is an arrival of new emotions to headquarters. That with puberty comes anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and ennui for new friends. Or enemies, as potentially the case may be. No spoilers, but I think there is something that is kind of the strategist's dream around the question of how these emotions were selected and what is the right cast of feelings that sort of makes sense for, yes, the story, but also the way we conceive of how feelings are. Like, how many different layers are there? Could you possibly subcategorize anxiety as a type of fear? And or is there a meaningful distinction between those two that means that they must be separate characters? And so I just couldn't help myself. I wanted to ask you, Joey, how do we decide what feelings matter?
Obviously, all feelings matter.
All of them.
Lay them all out.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is interesting. Like, we've talked about the emotional circumplex model on here before, right?
True.
Sort of amplitude or arousal on one axis and like valence on the other, like positive or negative, and sort of within that 2x2 axis, like how all the different things plot. But I think in thinking about those things, right, like the foundational emotions of like joy, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and what one am I missing? There's 6.
Joy.
Joy, sadness,
You say joy,
anger,
sadness,
fear,
disgust. There's only 5.
disgust. Well, within the psychological theory, there are 6 foundational emotions. Fear. No, I said fear. Surprise, maybe. Yes, I think surprise is within that. But some models now are saying like fear and surprise are not distinct, and disgust and anger are not distinct, like whatever. But what I started to wonder about when you first like asked this question was like, we have things that we know are like compound emotions, right? And I shared a paper which we'll put in the show notes, but like there are things like happily disgusted, right? Like, and you can think of moments when you've been happily disgusted, and we'll all have like different things, but like people who watch like pimple popping.
Is that Schadenfreude?
No, well, maybe. It like people watch like pimple popping videos, or if someone tells you like a gross joke that you think is funny but also still gross, like that.
Right. The hashtag oddly satisfying.
Yeah. Like or happily sad, like, in the paper that we'll share, there's like someone who won a gold medal at the Olympics is like weeping but happy clearly, and there's like facial distinctions in those compound emotions, right? And in Inside Out, that's when like one of those memory balls is like 2-colored. It's like a 2-tone thing. But then the question is like, are complex emotions the same as a compound emotion, right? Which I think like the new movie is trying to introduce, like ideas like ennui and anxiety and envy and embarrassment. There's something about them that is distinct. Like one, I think that there are people who study these things and put a lot of effort, but they feel more cognitive emotions than sort of they arise out of your cortex as opposed to your midbrain, or
Totally. And that's why I, of course, in the rabbit hole around this, stumbled upon the neuroscience behind Inside Out 2 article from Time magazine, which obviously is like, yes, click on this. And of course, there was a team of psychologists who were advisors to the film. And what was so interesting to me was learning about sort of the categorization behind these emotions. I guess, yes, like the 5 that are featured, maybe with the exception of surprise, are born from the way that we thought about emotion science, basically up until like, I think the range they gave is 1975 to 1995. And that model from psychologist Paul Ekman, who was a consultant on the movie, was about those 5 feelings: anger, fear, sadness, disgust, and joy. So that's why those are also like historically like the canon of emotions. But then what's interesting is that in core main heroine Riley becoming a teenager whose feelings these are, the way that they describe it is that anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and ennui are social emotions, things that like emerge in this new category that, yes, you could probably also categorize those inside of, or as interpretations of those base five. Like, is anxiety an interpretation of fear? But I think based on the way they're defined, in this sort of system or structure, it's starting to pull apart the distinctions that are only relevant when you start having a more social awareness. And I loved the idea. I think in this conversation, something that they reveal is like, if they were to do, the next film in the series, like the next set of emotions might be moral emotions like indignation, awe, desire, and compassion, which is fascinating. I was like, oh man, new feelings entered the chat.
new feelings enter the chat. New phone, who dis? Yeah, I mean, that idea, and because there's not like a unified theory of emotion, there are like these different things that emerge, right? Like the question of, do all of these complex emotions or social emotions or cognitive emotions, depending on which school of thought you subscribe to, exist in all creatures? Are they, right? Like, but it does fit within the idea of sort of social emotional development, right? Like at that pubescent period, you have new hormone systems kicking on. You still are having like cognitive development stages, like you're hitting new stages of cognitive development, like the like concrete operational phase and things like that. And so like it feels like it's like within that realm of like a Sapir-Whorf like effect of like, if you have a word for it, you can think it. Like your thinking is actually emergent based on your ability to ascribe words to what you're thinking. That's when it becomes concrete. In the same way, like the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows is sort of an interesting experiment, right? Like it was like a Tumblr that existed, and I think they since like have put out books, and there are a handful of the words in particular that really like sort of stood out and popped to people, and they may not be sort of physiological emotions per se, but it is the ability to put a word to a feeling that maybe you have felt. And like sonder is, right, the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, with elaborate, I'm like clipping out in here, like with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives you've never known existed, in which you may appear only once as an extra sipping coffee in the background. Like this idea of like having that moment of realization that other people's lives are as complex as your own, and that yours is different and distinct, and like that moment of like empathy and recognition of another human's complexity. Like putting a word to it is kind of nice, because you're like, I may have felt that once. Is it a foundational emotion? Maybe not, but like I can recognize that feeling.
It's fascinating to think of like the most distilled, concentrated version of a feeling is a thought. The idea that like if you can get that specific about it, it's like that specific thought ran through your mind of like, oh, that is the thing I am feeling at this time. Yeah. Right. And that and it's interesting that too, the whole idea of feelings and recognizing them and validating them and like our complicated relationship with them all depends on understanding them. That's where it's fascinating of like, maybe it's helpful to just add another one to describe a more specific interpretation, because the general one might not cut it, or might not, like, it's like, yes, sort of, it's fear, but it's not exactly fear. It's actually specifically the fear of what could go wrong in the future, rather than like the fear of the thing that is actively bearing down on me and I have to step out of the way because something is falling.
Yeah.
And so the more specific you can get, the closer someone can recognize, that is a thought that I've had. That is a thing that I've experienced.
I mean, I'm like going back to like when I was like studying like neuroscience and psychology, and like to be fair now, like it's been almost 20 years since I graduated college, so like a lot of research has been done in that time frame and may not be representative of sort of the standard model, but like there was a pretty big moment, maybe almost like viewquake level of things, when I took a class called motivation and emotion, and they were basically talking about like emotions are just your body's way to contend with you either meeting or not meeting whatever your motivations are, right? So if you're motivated to eat food, like you feel satisfied if you have like, eaten something and your body doesn't feel hunger. And if not, you will grow like increasingly irritable and angry and whatever, like eat a Snickers,
Yeah.
you're not yourself when you're hungry type of thing.
Yeah.
But like in the same way, right? Like these complex emotions that person is calling social emotions, right, are products of like social motivations as opposed to physiological motivations, right? Like
Yes.
disgust is emergent, being like, stay away from that. The further away from that thing I get, then I've like satisfied that because it maybe is dangerous or could make me ill or whatever. But in the context of social emotions, right, like this feeling of anxiety will emerge like based on a motivation to understand the world around you and to be able to predict future states. And when you can't do that, anxiety creeps in, or like needing social recognition for your value. And if you're not getting recognized for what you bring to the table, then you will start to envy other people around you because maybe you feel like they are getting recognized for their uniqueness or their positive qualities, right? Like it is like that motivation isn't being satisfied. And so you have these like emergent properties within like the complex of social interactions.
Totally. And it's also like, I think the moral of the movie, which is like all emotions are good, or the idea that like all emotions are valid and valuable, is because of this thing I think that you're getting at about like emotions have a utility. Like they are like they're a signal of maybe something that is not being met, or a thing that a need or something, right? And so that obviously there are so many ways where they can betray us, but also that their existence is, in good faith.
Yeah. I mean, you are like the thing that is really easy to forget, and I say this to myself as much as to anyone else that might be listening to this, is like all organisms and all systems are like working towards homeostasis, like some basal state where things are balanced. And a lot of our emotions are emergent from not hitting some sort of like local equilibria of like whatever it is that we need as an individual for a local equilibria. And so like feeling tired because you're like pushing too much is like your body being like, hey, take a fucking nap, like you should sleep. Or like, feeling burnt out is a product of not doing something else. Or like ennui in many instances, it's just like you're not getting enough stimulation. You have, as sort of like,
do something else.
Yeah, mammals, like a desire to explore to some threshold that is different for each individual. But when you're not doing that, then your body's like, hey, like read a book or find something new, or like see a new experience, or like talk to somebody, or whatever it is. And like that's when those things emerge. And so they do tell you like you are looking for some equilibria based on your person, right?
Yeah, that's even why like it's related to like the hedonic treadmill conversation. It goes both ways on like on the positive scale as well. Like can't have joy all the time.
Yeah.
That is also bad.
Yeah.
Then you don't know what joy feels like.
Yeah. Or the restorative power of boredom that we've talked about before. Like, yeah.
Right. Of just like maybe recalibrate yourself. Boredom is actually really helpful for that.
Yeah.
Are we turning the corner and approaching another corner?
Are we approaching Jess's
from one
emotional
corner to the
wrap-up
next
corner?
You beat me to the punch at the very beginning, but it's probably true. All feelings matter. All feelings are good. All feelings are useful. All feelings calibrate us back to the other feelings, and it just ping-pongs around. And I think they did a good job. I at first was a little skeptical, but I actually see a ton of value in sort of like the new drivers of certain types of emotions, and I recommend the movie. So, you should take a look.
Well, we did it.
Well.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by all the feels.
Feelings.
Period.
So many.
That's it. Feelings.
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and emotional champion, Jess Vander.
You're welcome. We'd also like to thank sound engineer and the joy on the block, Alex Contel. God, this is so hard. How does Aaron do it?
We'd like to thank our programming coordinator and senior emotional correspondent, Les Jacobs.
And our moral emotions. Thanks to our production crew. Sorry, Gilbert Norm Estridge.
As always, thanks, Ellen. Special thanks to Complex Emotions.
Yeah.
I'm realizing like a viewquake might actually be an emotion.
Whoa. Or is there an emotion that is experienced in it? Is it sonder-esque?
Oh, like awe or like wonder.
Yeah. And that it is like a certain echelon that can only be inspired in like a perspective shifting context.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a smallness and a bigness to the feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think this whole time about like sandwiches. So special thanks to sandwiches because they can help you imagine a compounding emotion where you've got just like different ingredients, but also complex emotions where you're just like mixing a mayo with something. And I guess that's an aioli now. But like technically it was originally two things, but now it's one new thing. And all of those can be on a sandwich. And the sandwich ingredient sort of shelf that you're pulling from can change over your life. Like the puberty sandwich ingredient shelf. And for some reason that made sense to me. But like, don't eat your feelings.
I hate the phrase puberty sandwich. I absolutely hate that. Don't eat your feelings, and puberty sandwiches are disgusting. It's just like, what kind of cheese did you put in this? Why does it smell that way? Ugh.
A little bit of disgust, but also satisfaction.
Yeah. It's disgust and pity for pubescent humans. Well, no thanks to puberty, but thanks to the sandwich model of emotions brought to you by Jess Vander.
There you go.
Happy day, happy week, happy wife, happy life. That's what they
We've
say.
lost the plot. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, love you,
thank
mean
so
it.
much.
Bye.
Bye.